Swan, and I'll be chairing this session. And the main title of the session is Control and Transparency Devices. And there will be a focus, of course, then on decommissioning issues, but I'm sure that transparency, of course, involves all parts of the nuclear field. We will also tomorrow have a separate seminar on radioactive waste management, and we will return and talk about transparency issues at tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. For me, it's really a pleasure to be here, and I feel very honored that I have been invited, because my core work is neither decommissioning nor waste management. But maybe I do have a little bit experience in terms of transparency and participation. Working already for 25 years in the field, maybe I got a little bit narrow-minded, but the advantage is that there's some experience and some long history. So how that is move further? Page down? Yep. No. Wrong. Okay. So, as the title is Principles and Policy, I start, so to say, with the pillars of the Austrian nuclear policy. It's clear that Austria opposes nuclear power, that already for decades, you could say, and that we are convinced that an energy union is possible and feasible without nuclear power. We also do think that in terms of environmental impacts, of costs, of social acceptability, of sustainability, that would be the better option. But we do know that every member state and also countries outside of the Union have the sovereign right to use nuclear power if they decide to do so. So the second pillar, is continuously improving nuclear safety and thus reducing risks. And the third pillar of our current work is transparency and participation in the nuclear sector. You could ask why is this important? I mean, in this room, probably nobody would question the importance of transparency and participation. But we are, apart from, let's say, democratic principles, we are convinced, and we're not the only one, that the public at large, that interested stakeholders, do have a role to play, and that they have an essential role in making us civil servants, regulators, but also the industry operators accountable for what we do. So you're part of the checks and balances, and I think this is extremely important. I'm pretty convinced that if there is enough public attention on certain processes, that would contribute to improving nuclear safety. Well, we are working on various European international fora, working groups, initiatives, etc. What I will touch upon today is in particular enabling participation of the public concerned in Austria, of course, in transparent procedures. And we also try to improve our communication on the national level with our stakeholders. But to be honest and blunt, it's always more easy to ask others to be transparent than to do it in their own country. Well, the instruments I just briefly touch, I mean, you know the Aarhus Convention, the Espoo Convention. The only thing what I would like to mention here is that the role of governments, in particular in transparent procedures under the Espoo Convention or under the protocol for the strategic environmental assessment, is slightly different from what the general public does, and we try to use that. I will come to that later. Austria has a number of bilateral agreements on nuclear safety, radiation protection, etc., with all operating neighboring countries plus a few more. And for us, the opportunities under the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive and the Strategic Environmental Assessment Directive, they are closely interrelated with what we do under the bilateral agreement. So for us, this is a complete network. Just for completeness, I mentioned the IE conventions, but in terms of participation, transparency, let's say they are of limited impact, to put it mildly. Our principles, I think that's important to understand why we do and what we do. Whenever an adverse transboundary impact cannot be excluded, and we are not talking about probability, we are talking about deterministics, then we consider us a concerned party. Of course, over the years we developed kind of graded approach. We do not work with the same, let's say, effort and the same resources for a nuclear project which is 1,500 kilometers away from the Austrian border and with one which is 50 kilometers. I mean, we have limited resources, so we have to focus a little bit on actually the potential risks. But so to say, the threshold is, are there adverse transboundary impacts possible? I mean, the conventions use the word likely. I'm not a native speaker, but I talked a lot, tried to learn what this word actually means. And you could read it at, is it probable? Will it happen tomorrow or very soon or whatever with a certain probability? Or is it possible? And we always use, of course, the second reading, is it possible? So if it's not excluded, it's possible, and then we consider us as a concerned party. What is an adverse impact? In our reading, it is any intervention measure we have to take. Yeah? Not civil servants sitting in the bureau, but if we would have to inform our farmers that they shouldn't use the grass or drive their cattle into the stables or something like that, or even just give a warning to the general public. In the very moment the general public would be involved, we consider that as an adverse impact, and therefore we also take care of in particular power plant projects which are far, far away from the Austrian border. We had some discussions with some of our, not neighboring countries, more distant countries, but in the end they accepted this approach. And within the procedures we do two things. We enable the public participation in Austria. This is the job of the government to do. And the second thing is, in nuclear project, we, in addition, we commission expert statements, we do bilateral consultation. This is an instrument which only the government have. There's no possibility for the general public to take part in these bilateral consultations. Because we think we as a ministry, we are a little bit like an advocate for the general public. We have the resources to make in-depth technical investigations, to make, I don't know, dispersion calculations or things like that, which the general public usually cannot do. And this work then also enables us, in this case via the website of our environmental agency, to make better information available to the general public. I have to apologize, this website is very informative because it contains all documents from all procedures where we have taken part over the last 10, 15 years or so, but most of it is in German language. I mean, a lot of it is in English because the environmental statements are in English, so our comments are in English, but the basic structure of the site is in German. We're working on a translation into English language, but that, again, is a question of available resources. So now on more specifically on the topic of today, there are already quite a number of decommission projects in Europe. It's limited experience, but there is experience, already many, many years ago. But specific projects where we somehow took part in the procedure are very, very limited. The one is the decommissioning of Bonice V1 in the Slovak Republic, where we, after, so to say, getting clarification what this is actually about, did not make a full scope participation, because according to the Slovak law, decommissioning only starts if and when all fuel plus all radioactive waste is removed from the site. And then we couldn't identify any adverse transboundary impact in terms of radiological consequences. So we had then bilateral consultations to know what the project is exactly about, but we had not a formal procedure. But we do have, one is just about to be finished and the other one has just started, two with Germany. One for ISAB 1 and the other one for Grundreinigen 2. And there are two reasons to do that. Both of these plants are on the banks of a river which ends up in the Danube, which provides additional path of impact. Usually we only have the air. In this case we also have the water. And the second more important thing is, and that's a German peculiarity, both operators intend to start real decommissioning work, really demolitioning work, once the fuel elements are still in the spent fuel pools. And this is something there are a lot of people who are a little bit concerned about that approach, and therefore there is a real risk also of transparent impact, so we are taking part in these procedures. The other things are not really decommissioning projects. I would like to highlight a little bit. The famous waste directive has been mentioned today several times. This waste directive requires us all, also as Austrians, to have a national program, that is to have a concept what we are going to do with our radioactive waste. And these programs have to undergo a strategic environmental assessment, no doubt about that, because they, well, with a few exceptions, it's a long discussion, with a few exceptions, they set the framework for future industrial projects, and therefore they'll have to undergo a strategic environmental assessment. With Germany and Hungary, we have that finished. With the Czech Republic, Italy, it is to come, because they're late, like we are late. And with the Slovak Republic and Slovenia, there are some specific actual cases where it in the end did not take place. So I can explain that in the discussion. And of course, we do it with our own national program. We are late. We should have delivered it a year ago. We didn't. But we will notify all our neighboring countries, probably second half of this year. I think then we are about to do it. And there's also some kind of public participation, information for the projects which are financed out of these decommissioning funds which are administered by the EIB in London. I mean, they usually recur now to the ESPO Convention or to the Hours Directive, but the bank as such has a transparency policy and a staged approach for the scale of the projects, not only in the nuclear sector, but general. So also the bank has to do some type of public consultation and information processes. And sitting on all of three of these funds, we pushed them very hard really to stick to their own rules and to compile this type of information. Yeah, I think I got a minute or so. What I would like to put in the discussion a little bit is, in more general terms regarding transparency and participation in the nuclear sector. Interested stakeholders are an opportunity. And we can see over the years a developing legal framework. I mean, currently we're, from what I see, let's say maybe a little bit on a turning point, because now a lot more people realize the potential of these instruments, and so they try to pull back a little bit. I mean, it's difficult to change a convention, but the interpretation of the convention is less difficult to change, and some states were a little bit pushy in having, let's say, a broad interpretation, particularly of the ESPO Convention, and when others realize that, then they try to pull the other end of the rope. So this is, but it's still developing. The famous stress tests for the nuclear power plants may not have delivered all what has been expected, but in terms of information and opportunities for participation, they set new standards. And we and others succeeded that this type of standard will now also be implemented in the first topical peer review, which is about to start these days, more or less, because the technical specifications and the terms of reference are now finally adopted, so it should start. I mean, for the public, it will start by the end of the year, but because then the national reports will be published, but there will be windows for consultation and questioning, etc., etc. But there are also limitations. Resource and time. Time for people who want to make their voice heard, resources for people who want to make their voice heard, but also in terms of procedures, because most of the national laws do not consider the additional time needed for transparent processes. That always creates a problem. Of course, we have the problem of different levels of knowledge and competence. We also have a problem that nowadays with security considerations and with information which is considered confidential of economic reasons, I would say that. And we do have a language barrier. Yeah? We here sitting, we're talking in English, but people concerned in a village somewhere out in the countryside, who could expect them, unless they are native speakers, to speak English or to read a complex technical legal document in a language they simply don't understand. On the other hand, it's absolutely impossible to translate hundreds, thousands of pages in many, many languages. So this is a real limitation of all these processes. And in more general terms, when you look over Europe, you have very, very different social cultural situations and traditions in terms of participation, which sometimes is an asset, sometimes is a detriment. And then there is also a question which hasn't been solved until today, that is, let's say, early participation or a well-developed project. You can't have both. So, and there's always a discussion. Do you want to be involved early? Then there's only a very vague idea of a project, or do you want to exactly know what they're going to do? Then you have to wait in the very late stage where we might not be able to influence it. So, I think this it was. Yeah, thank you very much.